Hey everyone, Eric here. In this video, we're checking out the Dunch from Champion Leccy. The Dunch from Champion Leccy is an overdrive, distortion, fuzz. Champion Leccy calls it a fuzzstortion, and I think that's a pretty apt name because it does all of those different sounds very well. Before we jump into the pedal, let's go over the signal chain. We're using my Epiphone ES335 going into the Dunch and then into the front of the Boss Katana. It's set pretty clean. So let's go ahead and jump into the pedal. So you can see that we have quite a few knobs. We have level, B, T, bias, gain over here on the bottom right, and then Dunch over here on the bottom left. And in between those two knobs, we have 3 different toggle switches. So at first glance, this might seem a little overwhelming, but trust me, it's very easy to understand and start using once you understand what these controls do. So if we start on the top left, the most basic control is level. That's gonna be our output volume. So if we turn it down, we don't get any sound. And as we start to turn it up, we're gonna get a louder and louder sound. So next, let's go ahead and flip to the other side on the bottom row to the gain control. Now this is a very familiar control that you'll find on many other gain pedals. It's the amount of breakup or gain or distortion, whatever you want to call it. If we turn it down, we're going to get a cleaner sound. And that's with the pedal on, so it gets very clean. And as we start to increase the gain, we're gonna get a dirtier and dirtier sound. So you can hear that there's a very wide gain range inside the Dunch. Now moving on, we have above the gain control, we have the bias control. And this is a control that you'll usually find on fuzz pedals. So how this bias control works is at minimum, we're providing the proper bias to all of the transistors inside the pedal. So we get a pretty normal and open and smooth sound. And now as we start to increase the bias control, we're actually starving the voltage from those transistors to get that starved fuzz sound. I'll start from the bottom and then we'll go up from there. You can hear that it's kind of choppy a little bit, especially up there at the higher settings. If we pick lightly, we get kind of, you know, the attack of our notes don't really ring out as much. And then that, in conjunction with one of the toggle switches, can really give you that gated fuzz texture. And speaking of the toggle switch, let's go ahead and look at the middle toggle switch, which is the gate control. And thus far, we've been hearing the gate in the bottom position, which means there's no gate cutting our signal off once it gets to a threshold. As we start to go into the different modes, so we have the middle toggle position and then the top toggle position, we are getting different levels, different characteristics of gates. In order to demonstrate this, I'm gonna play a chord pretty lightly, and we wanna focus on the sustain, the ringing of the chord. Because as we move from the bottom position, which is nothing, into the middle or top position, we get a different kind of decay or like breakup of our sound getting cut off. So let's go ahead and hear that. And you can hear that the top position is a more aggressive setting, and we get a lot more clipping and sputtering of our signal because it's a more aggressive gate. So when you pair that with higher gain settings and a low bias, you can really get that Velcro style fuzz. And if you just want your signal to be quiet when you stop playing, like this, you can turn that gain on and it cleans up the signal when you're not playing. Now let's move on to the EQ controls. We have the B and T knob, and these are controls over the bass and treble frequencies. These are active controls, and the really nice thing about these controls is they have a detent in the middle, so it kind of locks into place in that 12 o'clock to noon position. And you know that in that noon position, you're not getting boost or cut of either frequency. So if we want to boost one of the frequencies, we can turn it up past noon. So let's go ahead and start with the bass control. I'm gonna go ahead and play a little bit. As I turn that control up past noon, we're starting to increase the bass. We can choose to decrease the bass or attenuate the bass by turning the knob down past noon. And this sort of operation applies exactly the same way to our T control, only it takes over the treble frequencies. So if we have the control in noon, we're not getting a boost or cut, it's pretty flat. And if we want to increase the treble frequencies, we can turn the T knob up past noon. And then of course, if we want to attenuate the highs or decrease them, we can turn the T knob down past noon. Now this brings us to the EQ toggle controls. That is the right and left toggle control. They're labeled mid, high, and low, and those correspond to different positions on the toggle. So each one is a 3-position toggle. And what these toggle switches do is control the roll-off point within the frequency spectrum of both the B and T controls. So we can set where the bass control and the treble control kind of activate on the frequency spectrum. So as I mentioned before, we have 3 positions. We have a high in the middle, on the bottom we have mid, and then on the top we have low. The way I think of these positions is if we're looking at a frequency spectrum graph, the high is going to be higher up the frequency spectrum, the low is going to be the lowest on the frequency spectrum, and then the mid is going to be somewhere in between. To demonstrate that, I'm going to go ahead and play a little bit, and then we're going to roll off the bass control. right now, I am in the middle position on the B toggle switch. And that means we are farther up on the frequency spectrum. So what we're doing is we're attenuating more of the low end frequencies since we're high up on the frequency spectrum. When I turn it down to mid, we're going to shift that roll off down a little bit. So we're not going to be attenuating as many low frequencies. It's fairly subtle, but you can hear it. With the B control minimized, when we switch from the high setting to the mid setting, we're actually getting a little fuller sound because not as many bass frequencies are being reduced. So the same is going to go for the low setting, and it's going to be a little more drastic. So I'm going to go ahead and set the toggle back to the high position. So we're going to play a little bit, hear the high position, and then I'm going to go to the low position. You can hear that's more drastic because, again, if we look at a frequency spectrum, the high is going to be farther up, higher up the frequency spectrum. So if we're attenuating all those frequencies below that point, we're going to attenuate all the bass. And if we set it to the low position, we're attenuating less bass frequencies. And so it's the same if we want to maximize. So right now we have it on the low setting and I have completely boosted all of the bass. So let's hear how it sounds going from the low to the high setting. In the high setting, we're boosting a lot more bass frequencies. So if we move over to the T control, that is attached to a very similar toggle switch, identical. And on this toggle switch, we're doing the exact same thing. In order to demonstrate this, I'm gonna go ahead and play a little bit and we're gonna go from noon to minimum so we can hear that treble roll off. Now that's a really dark sound because we're set on the low setting. That means the roll-off point is lower in the frequency spectrum, thus you are eliminating or attenuating more high end. So if we want to attenuate less high end, we can put it in the mid or high setting. So let's go ahead and cycle through those. Here's the low. And you heard there with each increment, we're adding in a little more treble frequencies, or really we're attenuating less treble frequencies because that roll off is happening higher up the frequency. So that brings us to the Dunch control and the Dunch foot switch, which is the left foot switch, and that's connected to the red Dunch knob. In the normal operation, when you press the pedal on and off with this right foot switch, our level control is controlling the output. Now, once we engage the Dunch, now the red knob is controlling our output. So this becomes our master volume, essentially. And in the Dunch mode, we get a tone shift. So we get a little more low end, we get a little bit more saturation, and a little bit more output. So if we put the controls relatively same place, this is what it sounds like in the normal mode. Now, we can pair this to great effect with the bias control to get a more Velcro sound. On the neck pickup now. So we've got a really bassy sound. We've got the bias set up pretty high, so we're cutting off the signal, we're starving that transistor. And we can go ahead with the gate, turn the gate on, and then we get even more of a drastic cutoff. So now we have my Squier Classic Vibe Precision bass plugged into the Dunch, and of course we gotta hear it on bass. So we've got everything pretty much at noon. The bias is at minimum, so we're getting the proper voltage to the transistor. So I'm getting a little sputtery high end there. And I bet that's the gate. So I'm gonna play a little bit and then I'll turn off the gate. Yeah, so the gate was causing those high-end frequencies to kind of sputter and buzz a little bit. But if we turn the gate off, we get a more open sound and that sputteriness goes away, especially on the bass. Let's go ahead and try to fine-tune the EQ a little bit. I have the T set on low, so we're affecting the most treble frequencies, and the B set on high, so we're affecting the most bass frequencies. And let's just go ahead and give it a little bass boost. Let's do the same thing for the treble. Let's give it a little boost. That sounds really cool. Let's go ahead and engage the Dunch. I'm digging that quite a bit. So now this has me thinking, I'm pretty sure we can get a pretty synthy fuzz sounding bass. I'm gonna go ahead and turn the gate all the way up to the most aggressive setting, and we're gonna turn the bias up, maybe all the way, and then let's hear how that sounds. Maybe turn the gain up all the way. I think it's a little too hi-fi sounding, so I'm gonna turn the treble down. We're getting closer, but I think if we continue to shape the EQ a little bit, I hope you enjoyed this look at the Dunch from Champion Leccy. If you want to learn more about the Dunch or purchase it even, I'm going to leave a link to the Champion Leccy website in the description below. And while you're down there, if you're looking for any sort of other musical equipment, I do have affiliate links to Sweetwater, Reverb, and Amazon. What those do is they take you directly to those sites or a product, and then anything you buy through those links helps support the channel because I get a small commission. So they save you time. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and it's a great way to help support the channel if you want to do so. I want to send a huge thank you to my Patreon fam, my supporters over on Patreon. I really appreciate you all so much. And I want to say thank you to you watching this video again. I hope you're doing well out there. I hope you're staying safe, and I hope you're taking care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.